and happy Earth Day, everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for making it. Just looking at the people who've already arrived, we truly do have a global audience today, and this is great. So as Stephen mentioned, we want to talk about emerging markets and how new tech, whether it's FinTech, AI, or blockchain, is really helping the developing world to just to lift people out of poverty. And it's amazing that innovation and technology can do that. And again, we've got some really great speakers today, so I'll shut up. I'd like to go around and ask each if you could give a little introduction about yourself and what your business does and really how that relates to helping to support emerging markets. So if we go ahead and start with Gurvinder, if you'd like to lead us off.
Well, thank you, Edward, and Stephen, thank you for the opening remarks over here. My name is Gurvinder Ahluwalia. I'm the founder and CEO of Digital Twin Labs, which is a startup venture providing frontier technology services in building out platforms based on blockchain, IoT, and cloud. My entry into this space of frontier technologies has, particularly blockchain, has been for the last about 7 years. When I was at IBM and owned a blockchain business, me and a few others, we were the kind of pioneered the use of blockchain in the enterprise world for the first time, provided the proof to do that in partnership with Samsung, and in parallel co-founded the open source Hyperledger movement. I'm based in Dallas. Back to you, Edward.
Thank you, Guri. Yeah, next we'll go to Nikesh, who is the Chief Strategy Officer of Innovations Accelerated.
Yeah, thanks, Edward, and good morning, or in my case, good evening, everyone. Joining you from Sydney, where Innovations Accelerated is based. So my background is, look, we've been doing blockchain for, it feels like as long as I can remember. Started out as an executive doing payments and innovation at one of the large banks in Australia, focused on some of the early innovations in payments. We were one of the founding members of R3 Corda. Since then, been focused on specific blockchain innovations and assisting organizations innovate generally around payments and blockchain. So yeah, it's been a fun journey, and particularly now I think we're going to see a bit of a breakout from what I think has been a couple of years of trough. So yeah, really exciting times.
Thank you, Nikesh. So next we'll turn to Dr. Florence Nisabwe, who is the CEO of Fondation-LAB. You could give us a brief intro, Dr. Florence.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. It's really a great pleasure for me to be part of this great conversation. I'm Dr. Florence Nisabwe, and I'm from Burundi, but I have been living in South Africa for a number of years. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fondation-LAB, a nonprofit organization focusing on women empowerment and young girls empowerment through social entrepreneurship and leadership. And I'm also the founder of Rise and Shine House. It's a business company based in South Africa in the field of women and capacity building. And we plan to launch a magazine, but more than a magazine, if I can put it in that way, because it is an open space for many opportunities. And one of our key goals is to give businesses a platform to reach a wider audience. And this includes opening up investment opportunities, especially in the tourism sector and the new technologies. And this platform will offer visibility to a global audience and also serve as an educational tool. And why this? Because as I always say, we don't know what we don't know. So since we have some information to share with many, why not doing it so that people can discover more than what they know currently. Thank you so much.
That's great. And that's been a reoccurring theme, right? Identifying what you don't know is just so important. So Dr. Julian Weissenberg is an AI expert and founder of VisualSense AI Advisory. Julian, if you'd like to give a brief overview of what you're up to.
Thank you, Edward. Hi, everyone. So I'm an AI expert, and I basically help companies and organizations figure things out, how to make things work. So data collection, what algorithm to use, and how to deploy. I'm focused on AI for images, so that's computer vision and machine learning. And I also do tech due diligence for VCs and investors.
Great, thanks, Julian. And last, certainly not least, Jorden Woods, who is the founding partner at StarChain Ventures. So Jorden, if you could introduce yourself, and then we're going to stay with you and go right into the discussion about supply chain and ways to really leverage that throughout the emerging markets of the world. So.
Okay, great. Thanks, Edward. So yes, Jorden Woods here from StarChain Ventures. We are a venture studio based in Silicon Valley and very focused in similar ways with many of the other panelists on the convergence of advanced technologies like blockchain, AI, and IoT. With my co-author, I published a book called Enterprise Blockchain Has Arrived in 2019. Not just focused on blockchain, like cryptocurrencies, et cetera, which obviously tokenization is important, but also what is happening for businesses and large enterprises on a global basis. And have been very focused in 3 different areas: FinTech, healthcare, and supply chain for the convergence of these technologies. What we do is we spin up companies, and there's a lot of talent and capabilities here in Silicon Valley, but also globally. And we look for opportunities to deploy these technologies where they can have the greatest impact. We've been doing quite a lot of work in Africa recently, that's East Africa, but also we have deployed technologies in South America, Europe, and also in Asia. Looking forward to these different topics for the panel today. And Edward, do you want me to just go in and start talking about supply chain?
Yeah, when we spoke earlier, it's just remarkable just how the global supply chain and the way it really can positively affect emerging markets and also really pulls in all the topics we hope to discuss today: the FinTech, the AI, and of course the blockchain. So
sure,
just maybe give a little overview, your thoughts. What do you see?
Yeah, so supply chain's very important. All the goods, food, medicines, et cetera, that we have go through supply chains. A lot of people don't think about how we get our products or our food, but it's a complex process. Also building products, there are supply chains. So for cars, airplanes, furniture, et cetera, parts coming from all over the world. So it's a very global business. Like I mentioned, 50 trillion, it's larger than 50 trillion US dollars in scope. It's larger than any single country in terms of GDP. The issues that you find with regards to supply chains are there can be counterfeiting, right? So if we think about different types of goods, high-end fashion items, for example, even metals, airplane parts, et cetera. There's a lot of counterfeiting that goes on in the world today. Counterfeiting of drugs is a $200 billion issue. And if you look at which areas are being impacted the most, it's actually the developing world, where standards are maybe not as high in terms of the process of maintaining authenticity. There may not be laws in place for maintaining authenticity. But if you have blockchain and IoT, for example, you can put in place tracking, and then the different physical goods can be tracked through their process. At each part of the supply chain, you have a change in custody, and that custody can be tracked, and then the information placed onto a blockchain, which provides immutability. So the information cannot be changed, it cannot be modified, and it also provides transparency. One of the main issues is that most players in a supply chain, they really only know what happens before them, so where they got the products from, and then where the products are going. Obviously, if you have a supply chain that has more than 3 steps, that creates a lot of potential for fraud, for all types of different issues. With regards to, for example, vaccines, we were just talking about vaccines earlier, especially in the developing world. A big issue is that most vaccines, and we know this with the COVID vaccine, have to be kept at a particular temperature. It's called a cold chain or cold storage. And if you look at what happens with regards to UNICEF, which distributes a lot of vaccines throughout the developing world, about 50 to 80% of these vaccines are spoiled through the supply chain process, meaning that the product at the end is not actually usable. I can go on, there's a lot of different things. I know my panel, mates would be very interested in speaking about these, but the important thing is that combination of blockchain, AI, and IoT can provide authenticity, can provide provenance, so what happens through the process, accountability, so if there is spoilage, who's at fault, etc. So we can go into those topics in a lot more detail, but I just thought I'd give an overview, and happy to comment further.
Great, thank you, Jorden. And next, if we could go back to Guri, I know we discussed, and you mentioned that at Digital Twin Labs, you mentioned how you're doing a lot of work with supply chain for nutrition in emerging markets. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So some of this work comes from work that we've done in, broadly speaking, in the food traceability, food provenance sector. That's previous work while I was at IBM. I was the Chief Technology Officer for IBM's blockchain, IoT, and cloud business unit for North America. So the traceability of food there was particularly for use cases and challenges like contamination and recall. I think it's well known, the case on Chipotle, on how long it took for them to, identify where all the contaminated chicken went, and something like 7 months. And by then, they'd been sued, from multiple entities. So now the traceability of food, and I'll come specifically to nutrition in just a moment, is, what used to take probably 2, 3, 7 days, in a matter of minutes, you can identify which exact farm, and even understand the farmer's family and background, a little bit of a narrative on empathy over there into the supply chain. The work in nutrition, really my learning and experience comes from the Gates Foundation. I don't represent them, just to be clear, but I am an advisor in my individual capacity to the Gates Foundation on their digitization program, specifically on nutrition. The challenge with nutrition is there are massive disadvantaged sections of population in humanity, and that's only exacerbated, by the way, with COVID. And some of you might know how the numbers on poverty have dropped and basically got washed. The population that got moved up from the poverty line in the last 30, 40 years, basically all that progress and gain has been pretty much wiped out in the matter of the last 12 months or so as a result of COVID. Sorry for the digression, but more to the nutrition point, there are large populations of society, particularly children and women of childbearing age that are either malnourished or undernourished. Now, mind you, this is different from hunger, which is one of the initiatives in SDG, Zero Hunger. Sometimes people don't go hungry, but they are still malnourished. It's like, you end up eating a bag of Cheetos and your stomach feels full. Your fingers are red, but you're actually not nourished very well. Your hunger is satiated. So the world actually for the last 40 years, so this concept is not new, has been fortifying food with essential minerals and vitamins fortified into commodity food. There are some common patterns around, like rice is widely eaten throughout the world. And then there are country-specific preferences on what is commodity kind of agri items over there. The connection with IoT and blockchain, and I'll wrap up with this part, is the measurement both in the compliance side as well as the measurement in the outcome, meaning the impact, right? Not just the outcome, but the actual impact on the demand and the humanity side has been very, very spotty and very, very choppy. There are massive organizations, not just the Gates Foundation, but the World Food Program. Then there are specific organizations that are specific to nutrition and fortified food. Something called LSFF, large scale fortified food, is like a whole discipline in itself. So the purpose of an investigation, blockchain and kind of conducting experiments is now, how can I bring more tracking and truth of data in this massive global supply chain with so many large organizations, meaning mills, scientific organizations, country agencies, philanthropists, so on and so forth, agri-producers, and the data is massive, but it's not trusted. So if you build it on a blockchain, that's kind of one element to kind of the possible answers over there. The other IoT intersection over here is this is a physical, supply chains are physical as we were just discussing previously as well. So the measurements of the efficacy of minerals and vitamins in that agricultural product in the supply chain, which incidentally also depletes while it stays in the supply chain. If it stays in the supply chain, it has only so much shelf life in warehouses and bags. So the IoT aspect in getting the measurement instrument, the data from the measuring instruments back into the blockchain is the other aspect of challenge because of the very proprietary instruments. But it does make the connection with IoT. And the last pillar on this to kind of complete the themes of the talk of the panel over here is, now you can apply intelligence, AI to managing those data, and equally importantly, smart contracts, I would say, to automate compliance and measurements. So there's a very, very important use case, partly for social good, not just for emerging countries, but even advanced countries, consume large-scale fortified food. Back to you, Edward.
That was a great overview. Thank you. Dr. Florence,
yes.
Do you have anything to share from your perspective on what we're discussing?
Yeah, thank you so much. I think that Africa has a strained relationship with this topic discussion of today. As you know, much of Africa is still rural. So I'm going to share with you the challenges and as well the opportunities. So let's talk about the challenges of technology adoption in Africa. For instance, there is a low internet connectivity. Here you must know that only 26% of Africans have mobile internet access. So it's a widely distributed rural population, and the cost of the data is higher. There is a limited infrastructure, physical or digital, and most of the populations are underbanked. So you understand that the cash data economies do not translate well into the digital transaction. But we also acknowledge that the pace of change is accelerating. For instance, my experience in South Africa is that is much more technologically advanced, an advanced society, and this society has been quick to embrace new technologies to meet the global standard. So we also acknowledge that challenges can also meet opportunity. Why? Africa's limited infrastructure can actually promote innovation. Some countries, they are doing well, where medicine delivery can be by drone, mobile telephony, many mobile telephony rather than landlines are in place. And also there is the system in place, the mobile cash technology, example, M-Pesa in some countries like Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania. And also we have some home grow solution. So from the supply chain innovation, logistical challenges throughout Africa, the main of the challenges are like distances. And this depending on the size of the country's quality or the quality of the road, the topography, informal settlement, well, you would find that there is a lack of street or house designation and the economic migration. So you understand that the supply chain, the distribution is not really easy at all. But we can also see, on the other hand, possible solution like alternative mapping. We can look at the 3 words, and from the alternative delivery method, we can also see at the how can we have hubs for distribution, for collection, and drop off points, and how can we use drones to distribute the items or other stuff. So alternative payments, we can promote mobile cash, cryptocurrency, but here we have to acknowledge that this also mobile cash, cryptocurrency depend on the infrastructure. So even though supply chain innovation depends on connectivity, the importance like efficiencies, order tracking, reduced cost of consumer goods, you understand that given the background drop area in the from Africa perspective, it is not really easy at all to rely on the technology because there is this lack of infrastructure, despite the importance and the role of the technology in these days. What can I share again? The blockchain. The blockchain, we know that it presents advantages for Africa, like easier transaction, not controlled by governments, and does away with exchange rate, currency fluctuation. However, cryptocurrencies are inherently volatile. And the advantages is that the potential disadvantages are that there is a lack of understanding on part of regulators. And also here I can say that government are so skeptic and suspicion toward this this new system. And also we can notice the instability, sudden, unpredictable, and large changes in value. And this can undermine personal or business financial security. We have also the lack of general understanding of how they work. And this can be harnessed. What is also that it does not really create trust. And we also recognize that sometimes it is an opportunity for fraud or crime.
Right. It goes back to your, the point you made earlier about all of the unknowns out there, and the potential for unintended consequences related to technology and new innovations and initiatives. Sort of get that sense from what you're saying.
Come back, please.
I'm sorry, Dr. Florence, did you have anything else? I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Is it a question?
No, I just wanted to know if you had anything else. I interrupted you there, I think.
Okay, sorry, okay. So maybe during our conversation, I will be sharing more information, but I think that any challenge is an opportunity for innovation. So we would like to encourage really innovative solution and through entrepreneurship behavior. And also, as I said earlier, we need also to discover what we don't know, because there is also the educational system which doesn't allow many to really understand how the world is doing and what can we do. So I think there is also a need of changing our educational system, and also how can we really give or value the role of mentorship in that sector. So in seeking solution to local problem, innovative thinking gives rise to entrepreneurship opportunity, definitely.
Okay, great, thank you. So Julian, I know a lot of the work you do is really sort of bringing all these components and aspects together. What are your thoughts?
So what I've seen is that the picture is quite different in emerging markets in terms of what type of solutions are deployed there. The first thing is that you often start with no legacy. So you don't have that constraint that it has to be compatible with whatever has been built before or the habits that people might have. And in a way, it's a good opportunity because it means you can build things which are a lot simpler. So you'll have a focus on mobile-first applications, even though, as Florence said, not everyone has access to the internet yet. And of course, then one of the challenge is not to do the same mistakes that were done in more developed markets. So take better care of avoiding biases, of of explainability. So not having a black box whose decisions are not really well understood, and of course of privacy, which is still a really some issue that has to be worked upon in all markets, in fact. And also what's quite interesting is how the regulations are a little bit more flexible for newer technologies. So for example, you'll have delivery systems through drones, like Florence mentioned. So that can be for blood supplies or other medical supplies. Also, what I find quite interesting, going to the point that Guri made on supply chains, is how you have tools that allow you to have a better understanding on the work conditions or how things are being produced. So this could be by looking at surveying workers and then checking if something is a bit odd in the way that they're doing their work. And then you could check for the use of slavery, and also about environmental issues. So with aerial images, you can analyze what's going on the ground, and that could help you figure out how the standards are as well. Back to you, Edward.
Thank you. Yeah, and I like how you mentioned, the whole sort of clean slate and the opportunity to get everything right the first time, which we failed to do in a lot of other markets. I think that's pretty important to consider. So Nikesh, I know you work mostly on the payment side, so maybe how you see dealing with the emerging markets and I know you've done some work with stable coins and other types of.
Sure. Yeah, look, this has been fantastic. I think we heard from Jorden, Guri, and Florence about the real problems, and Julien as well about the real problems that we're facing. And it's good to put it in perspective, right? So it's just amazing that today, 2020, 10 years after blockchain, 10 years after FinTech, 10 years after AI, a lot more actually, we still can't figure out where that contaminated chicken came from. We still have a world hunger problem. We still have a transfer of money problem, and we've been struggling with this for a long time. And those who've been working on blockchain have had similar sort of struggles. I think a couple of things that I think are really important. Like there is that capacity to disrupt, and as Florence said with M-Pesa, that's the poster child of payment disruptions. It is possible, but I think there are a couple of things that are holding us back, and particularly I think one of them is the two big ones. I think number one, access to that infrastructure, that digital infrastructure. Ultimately, emerging citizens, the poor of the world don't have access to the internet. This is a big problem that we need to solve. I think look at the capacity for blockchain to solve these problems. The one thing that when you try to solve them in anger, the one thing that kept on popping up, and I think Guri, you mentioned this, was the truth of data. And ultimately, I think that boils down to identity, digital identity. And that's digital identity, whether you're identifying, broccoli from a farm. It's digital identity if it's the Internet of Things. It's digital identity if it's an individual who is going hungry tonight. And if we could solve the problem of, number one, giving access to everyone to the digital economy, and number two, being able to have a decentralized identification system that enables, like, my problem is that I had dinner last night. There's no way for me in the first world to know that there's someone in the other end of the world who's going hungry, and just to be able to know that, okay, there's a person X in South Africa who's not going to eat tonight. Let me pay for their meals. If you had that capacity to digitally identify everyone in the world, I think a lot of these problems would go away. And the interesting bit of technology that's coming out, I think, is the work that's being done by a number of organizations, Sovereign, W3C, trust over IP, the decentralized identity foundation, and so on. I think we're seeing solutions in Hyperledger. Guri, that's your blockchain. We're seeing solutions in Bitcoin with Microsoft Ion, sidechain, IOTA, Ethereum, around solving the digital identity problem. And I think this is really probably the big thing for the next 5 years, is how do we make that actually work, so that we've got a consistent way of identifying anything, whether it's farming produce to an individual across the internet, and then applying that digital infrastructure, ensuring that everyone's got access to it. I think these are the big things that we all need to be working on.
Thanks, Nikesh. And let's actually stay with you. Right before we got started, we were discussing who has their flu shots or their COVID shots. And, it brought up the idea about, localization of technologies and how innovation hubs could be anywhere. You're in Australia right now, and really how that evolution can, again, assist emerging markets, or what sort of unique challenges may be created there.
I think that's and that comes back to the digital identity problem. I think we had a problem where we didn't have one. I mean, most of the world doesn't really have a digital identity solution. ID cards are coming out. I think in India they've got a big Aadhaar rollout, which is fantastic, but it's not really solving the problem. What happened that I think is unique, particularly where I am in Sydney, New South Wales, is during COVID, and this is a localization thing, everyone, when they had visited any place, whether it was a cafe or a chemist, had to register, and the government would collect that registration. They had to have an app to register. Unfortunately, in Sydney, almost everyone's got a smartphone. And that app became ubiquitous. And now we're in the unique position that we weren't in 1 year ago, where everyone has this digital identity. And the power of that is immense. Like, we're now able to, the local government said, look, we know who you are now. We're going to give everyone $50 to spend in any business in the state to get the economy going again. And all these things were possible because of digital identity. I don't think it would have been possible before COVID, and it wouldn't have been possible without that identity. I think it's just made such a big difference. And I really think that some of the big problems that Jorden, Julien, Guri, and Florence mentioned will be solved if we solve this digital identity problem, not locally, but globally.
Great, thank you. Jorden, what are your thoughts on that? We've talked a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think and Nikesh has some very, very good ideas there. I would like to just take a slightly different angle, which is that we definitely need this infrastructure, and that's very important. And that's infrastructure not only in terms of the hardware, the internet, the technologies, so the software, but also entrepreneurial programs, on a global basis, and also obviously funding and a lot of things that go with the entrepreneurial community. But I also think that each location in the world is going to adopt and use these technologies in some cases very different, and in other cases slightly different ways. So if you look at how investment in the developing world has proceeded over maybe the last decade, often you would have something that was popular in Silicon Valley or in the US or say Europe, and maybe think about Uber or DoorDash or something like this, and then there would be some kind of a copycat. It's like the idea is, in another part of the world, they're going to do the same thing, and they're going to need the same kind of technology and the same type of solution. However, what we're starting to see is that that's not always the case. Florence brought up M-Pesa. Mobile money is a very different way of interacting with money than, you know, what we have with credit cards or, you know, debit cards in Europe. There is really much more of a decentralized point-to-point kind of a system between people, and people use it in different ways. So for example, with M-Pesa, a lot of people may not realize this, but you can pay your electric bill, right? Just by using your phone and, you know, paying for that electric bill, just going to a, you know, an icon on your screen. That's not something that we have in the US, right? You can't just go to some icon on your screen in an app that you have and pay your electric bill. So that's a very significant difference. You can also, for example, there's other types of services that you may want access to. So I think there's this idea that as different centers of entrepreneurialism rise up around the world, they may use the technology and the solutions in a very different way than, you know, we use them here in Silicon Valley. And you're also getting, you know, things like super apps that are coming about. So for example, if you look at China, a lot of their solutions that people use are actually like 2 or 3 or 4, you know, types of companies that we have here in the US. So you may have, you know, a gaming portal and a microblogging service and your ability to, you know, pay for food and do e-commerce and banking all within a single app, right? It's not going to be 4 or 5 different apps. That's all going to be one kind of app. And if you look at, you know, the way that the infrastructure might go in for some of these solutions, you know, in the developing world, in the developed world, a lot of people are using cars and are getting around using GPS. Florence has mentioned that, you know, a lot of places don't have GPS, right? They don't have addresses. And so, you know, you're hiring people who might be on bicycles or motorbikes who might know a certain area, and they just know where stuff is. And so they're becoming your last mile delivery service. And they're working off of, you know, a mobile app, which might be not on a smartphone, but it's on a feature phone or it's on a smart feature phone. And this kind of smart feature phone capability and the need for it doesn't really exist in the developed world where everybody is kind of moving to smartphones, but because of cost and because of, you know, capabilities within the local economy, you're going to get these different kinds of innovations. So I think it's very important to realize that if, as an entrepreneur, and we have a lot of entrepreneurs here on this this particular session, think about what the needs are in each market, right? And, you know, this idea of taking something that we have here and copying it and just kind of printing it in different markets overseas may not work. It may need to be a combination of services. It may need to be, you know, something similar to here, but then with a twist, right? The infrastructure is going to be different in terms of how you deploy it. The banking system, you know, that you're interacting with, it may be with unbanked people, right? There is no banking system. So there's a lot of room for differences of solution. They're going to be using a lot of the technologies that we've been talking about, but they're probably going to be deploying them in very different ways. And don't get, when coming up with a solution, don't just think about how it's being used and deployed here. You know, get more creative and look really at what the needs are. It's really design thinking, right? What's the design thinking paradigm for that specific market, and what do they need, rather than taking like a rocket internet kind of an approach. So anyway, I just wanted to provide that perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Jorden. So Julian, do you see have anything to add as far as how this evolution will either, you know, benefit or create certain challenges maybe we're not anticipating?
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, you have a wealth of applications which were not accessible before, which all of a sudden are becoming more and more accessible, and that's the benefit. And this can be in agriculture, where you're able to look up from the sky when you should water your plants or harvest them. Or it can be in EdTech, where you can have better personalized courses for a wide array of people, or access to healthcare, or power networks, where you could use more renewable energies if you have smarter grids. So of course, like, you have a lot of positive, but I think on the challenges, well, of course, there is the gap that might increase between the people who are then digital and the ones who are not in those markets. Even though I have heard that a lot of people will share their phones. So I think this is an interesting pattern as well. Like, if not everyone has access to a device, they can use their neighbors or the families. And I think one of the really main challenge is that the population may not have been exposed to all the issues that we have been exposed for so long in developed markets. So all these issues that we have not necessarily solved yet, of biases, explainability, privacy, so that's more on the AI side. I think these may be a bit passed on to as well, these new markets. And I think it's very important from the inception of these technologies to take care of these problems and not just think, let's solve this later.
Thank you. So Florence, do you see any downside to the localization of technology and really how it's managed? Florence? Looks like she may be frozen.
Yeah, her frame looks like it's frozen.
Yeah, so Guri, I know you had a lot to add on this specific topic as well. Anything we missed? Anything?
Well, I won't characterize it that we missed, and of course we have limited time. I was mentioned as the arsonist on a few. Just build on a few of the remarks that the previous guys, the other panelists left off on. Can you still hear me, Edward? I see something unstable. Can you still hear me?
Breaking up a little bit, but now it seems that you're back.
Okay. So I totally agree, and I would emphasize and advocate the point that Jorden left off on, and that is about the importance of design thinking in crypto and blockchain. The user interface, the UX. People don't know what they're doing; they're just jumping into it. Because they want to be present, and it's getting closer to the masses without them knowing what they're really doing. And part of that is just the interfaces and the UX is really broken. So I would add to Jordan's thinking, really, design thinking also, kind of incorporates empathy, especially when you want to take any innovation out to the masses. I think Nikesh made a point around privacy, and even on the chat, I'm seeing some discussions around identity, and Stephen has a question a little bit on that. I'll just speak briefly to that and then give it back to you. Identity is a very, very sensitive topic. Digital identity is an even more sensitive topic. And now when you combine that in the COVID situation, in some cases, it is being argued, it's being argued that digital health passport, and I speak directly to this because I'm one of the co-conveners and co-leads of what's called the COVID Credentials Initiative, which is a kind of a nonprofit standards thing to, discover and kind of convene expertise in actual proofs, actual demos and implementations for digital health passports. All of us have heard, about that in different countries. two challenges with that. One is the problem around, if we innovate something in one country, does it necessarily apply to the rest of the world? Or if we innovate something in a set of countries, it doesn't. Singapore has adopted digital passports. I'm guessing China has. I can't speak authoritatively on the latest over there. In the US, certain states have, but there is a massive movement also challenging the use of digital health passports. In fact, the WHO only earlier this week, I believe, came up with their latest pronouncements on the COVID situation, and paragraph number 10 or section number 10 over there outlines that they are not requiring proof of vaccination for international, cross-border travels. They're not mandating it. And the pushback is one of running the risk of mass surveillance. And those of us from the US know how important and volatile a topic that is. So this is a very, very delicate situation on how to use blockchain, and particularly something called verifiable credentials, which is sort of, just think of it as an element within blockchain technology. The use of that for digital health passports. Back to you, Edward.
That was fantastic information. We only have a few minutes left, and I appreciate everyone being proactive in the chat and with responding to questions and trying to help out some of today's attendees. Does anyone have anything in particular from the chat that you'd like to highlight? Or maybe you've provided a partial answer, or you'd like to add a little color around something for any of our panelists. Is there anything there?
This is Steve. I just wanted to delve a little bit into the identity, not to overtake the conversation with this, but I run into this these concepts in different realms and projects that I've worked on. Biometrics, unique identifiers, PII, the capability of hacking that persona. Any additional thoughts from anyone else? I think it's quite a, it sounds simple, but it's very complex. Thank you.
Look, I think from my perspective, yes, it is very complex. And, look, I agree with you, Stephen and Guri. I think the problem that we have is, how to preserve privacy, as you said. I think that's a big deal. But the good thing is, I think there is an emerging consensus now. The challenge is, I think as a community, we're splintered between the different blockchain solutions. And so I think coming together, forming a standard around, I view it as, say, no matter what model you go for, whether you believe in blockchain or not, but some kind of API where we're able to share these verifiable credentials, as Guri said, would be fantastic. And there's a lot of work that's been done on how you preserve that privacy. And it's a lot better than the old days where you had to carry your papers. And when I showed you my papers, you could see everything. Now all you have to do is declare, look, I'm a human being. That's all you need to know. Or I'm over 18. That's all you need to know. So there's a lot of capacity within the technology to limit what's called the verifiable presentations that you issue. But nevertheless, I think if we get on the back of this emerging consensus as a community, I think we can really progress some of the things that are, we've been stuck on in the blockchain world. Look, I'm telling you this as a blockchain strategy officer. It always comes down to, how do you solve the identity problem? And if we can make that work, I think, it'll just open up so much. Along with, I think, Florence has got that, and Jorden, you've got that good point about the infrastructure, right? Not just giving everyone a smartphone, not just giving everyone the internet, but supporting businesses in these emerging markets to come up with their own solutions that can leverage this kind of identity.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think digital identity, and especially a blockchain-based digital identity, as we've been alluding to, which is decentralized. I think there's this trilemma that we're trying to deal with, and a trilemma is where you're trying to solve three different problems at the same time. And if you look at what's happening with the cryptocurrency space, people are basically saying, okay, you have a trilemma which has three pieces. You've got security, you have privacy, and you have compliance, right? Compliance is becoming exceedingly important in the world today. And if you look at a lot of the solutions that are being thought of by governments, they're really looking at something that is providing security and compliance. Well, security and compliance leaves out privacy, which can lead to a surveillance kind of situation, right? Because the privacy is not being solved for. If you look at the cryptocurrency type of situation, you have anonymity or pseudonymity, and so you do have privacy. You do have security, as has been proven by the major blockchains, but you do not have compliance, right? And so if you actually can solve this situation, and identity is a big piece of it, but identity, you know, can be the foundation for everything from digital wallets, you know, as Nikesh had pointed out, so that, you know, governments and different groups can interact with individuals in a decentralized way, point to point between individuals, as you see, for example, in Africa, with, you know, but based on a digital wallet with identity. And then if you know, start looking at healthcare, none of us have our, you know, our healthcare at our fingertips, right? And so if you look at healthcare and identity, they're really, you know, your health record is very, very personal, and that information is critical to your well-being, right? When you go to a doctor, you want to be able to have your health records at your fingertips, but most people do not, right? Anywhere in the world. And if you cross borders, it drops even more. So this ability to have wallets, a digital wallet that has that's linked to our identity, it has certain parts of our persona and our personal data, be it our health data, be it our financial information or access to be able to do, you know, banking, so that you don't need a bank account, so that you can actually bank all the unbanked, but, you know, through a digital wallet in finance. And then, you know, being able to, in supply chains, for example, being able to, you know, track and trace, you know, through the supply chain, providing identities to individual items in a supply chain. So this is a, you know, identity for inanimate objects. Anyway, there's so much that can be done when you bring identity into the mix with blockchain, AI, and IoT. And I very much agree that this will create a massive revolution in everything that we do, you know, online and offline. And we're just getting to the very beginning of it, but it's going to unleash a tremendous amount of new innovation, which is going to, you know, open up, you know, trillions of dollars in new opportunity.
Oh, that's amazing. I wish we had more time, but thank you so much, Jorden. We're at the top of the hour. Florence, it looks like you're back with us. You had a technical issue before. Do you want to leave any closing thoughts since we had to pass you by? Do you want to?
Yes, yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I think that really, if it is not late, it is the great moment for Africa to shift. And it is very important, as the pandemic situation has taught us a lot in the use of new technologies. But I must stress on the fact that really the information doesn't flow. All that is needed for Africa or African people to understand or to avoid to be on the back foot and embrace the standards is really to get the information. And here I must also stress on the fact that it seems to be a category of people who must do well. And if we want really to image at the same time what is not possible at the same time, at the same level, but we can also see how we can come back and deliver the information, teach people the good, the bad, the advantage, the disadvantage of the use of the new technology. So that if I make a choice, I make a choice based on the great information that I have. If I don't make a choice, I know that, okay, I have all the information, but I don't want. But I request really to share information about what we know and help people to know what they don't know and make the great choices.
Great, great. Thank you, Dr. Florence. Guri, Julian, Nikesh, anything to add?
I'm basically good. I think we suffer from an asymmetric financial health disadvantages do exist. I will leave the message that technology is not going to fix all these problems. It is hand in hand with how governance is approached. And I would also point many of you to look at the work on institutional economics by Doug North, Nobel Prize winner in economics, which really provides the fundamentals and explain the disruption that the technology on top, like blockchain and machine learning, is kind of causing. Back to you, Edward. Thanks so much for inviting me to the panel.
No, thank you. This has been tremendous. Julian?
Yeah. I think what will be important is to be open-minded. So not try to replicate what has been done in other markets, as was mentioned before, and also to empower people to do their own things and not just centralize everything and make them dependent on one type of solutions.
Thank you, Julian. So Nikesh, you get the last words. So you can,
no, thank you. And look, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that decentralization is important, but with that comes the responsibility to be more collaborative and solving these big problems. Like how do we, and as Guri said, they're not just technology problems, but how do we get food to the hungry? How do we give access to digital capabilities to the poor? How do we solve the fundamental problems like digital identity? All these things we need to work on collaboratively in a decentralized way. I agree, but we need to all chip in and make a difference.
Great. That's a great way to end it right there.